Welcome to a new episode of Mind Your Mind. Today, I'm very, very pleased to be with Dr. Beverley Costa. I am Roxana Barra Sepulveda, your host. Beverley qualified as a psychotherapist, and after that, she set up Mother Tongue Multi-Ethnic Counseling Service for multilingual clients. In 2019, she created a pool of mental health interpreters. In 2010, she then established the National Bilingual Therapist and Mental Health Interpreter Forum and founded the Pásalo Project in 2017 to disseminate learning from mother tongue. She has trained over 5,000 therapists for NHS services and NGOs in working therapeutically across languages and with interpreters since 2013. She is the Senior Practitioner Fellow at Birkbeck University of London, and in 2023, she was granted the title Senior Visiting Research Fellow in the School of Arts and Communication Design at the University of Reading. She is the author of Other Tongues, Psychological Therapies in a Multilingual World. Beverley has run reflective practice support groups, which we will be talking in extent today, for interpreters, psychological therapists and counselors, nurses, teachers, lawyers, and psychosocial workers. And we will also be talking about the groups that she's doing and the courses that she's running to help everybody to develop those skills to run the reflective groups. But first of all, just a big, big, big welcome for you, Dr. Beverley Costa, and happy to have you here.
Oh, Roxana, I am delighted to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me.
I thank you for being here. I am very happy actually for this conversation, because one of the things that I have enjoyed the most over the years and getting to know you and crossing our paths in different moments is that not only you led me to think about multilingualism in my own practice, but little by little we have been also talking about reflective groups and share some experiences around that. And I know that you have very clear ideas of how this can be done. And so I was really, really keen to share this with our audience here in the podcast, because as you know, is dedicated for all professional helpers in different roles and different positions with different levels of expertise. And the idea is that they get to know more and more about what it is to take a pause. And so the invitation today will be very much to take a pause and start to create those reflective groups, probably with their own teams, with their colleagues, but I think we need to go step by step and start to make some clarifications about the concepts and the ideas, the differences. We are both clinical supervisors, and so our audience know when we were preparing this episode, we were having this conversation about, okay, let's figure out, let's think a little bit more, and let's try to also talk in this episode about the differences between clinical supervision and so on. So I think that could be a starting point. Beverley, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a great starting point. Yeah, thank you. Okay, all right. So before we start, just to say, you're right. I have got some clear ideas, but I also would like to think that I'm really open to learning as well. So these ideas are formed from the experiences, the learning that I've had, but it's an ongoing practice and it's
Yes.
developing all the time. So I welcome feedback as well. So I don't know if any of your listeners ever give any feedback, but it's great to hear as well. Some of you might say, well, I don't think that works, but I've tried this. And so it's a great opportunity for everybody to learn in that way. And in fact, that is what the Reflective Practice Group offers, exactly that. It is
Yes.
this group sharing of ideas, of thinking together about issues, dilemmas, celebrating things together, and that there is a kind of collective wisdom that comes out of that sharing. But you asked me about the kind of difference between clinical supervision and reflective practice. And I'll start by saying what I think the key difference is,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'll tell you a little bit about what I think reflective practice in a group is, and people can see for themselves whether they agree with me or not, that there's really one basic key difference. So the key difference for me is that in a reflective practice group, um, there's no clinical responsibility. So the facilitator does not
Mm-hmm.
hold clinical responsibility for the work. It's a shared space to think together, and to see what can creatively come out of that. So the frame is a clear frame, but it doesn't involve clinical responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
So, when I explain what I think a reflective practice group is doing, I'm guessing that other people think like me that it's like very much like a supervision group. So what it involves is effectively thinking. It's called a reflective practice support group.
Yes.
It's thinking about our practice. It's thinking about our work and the impact that work has on us, but
Mm-hmm.
also how we can then do our work better. It's ultimately it. And it incorporates theories of learning, for example, Schoen's reflection in action, for example, Kolb's reflective learning cycle, where you have an experience, you reflect on it, you conceptualize about it, all of this happening in the group,
Mm-hmm.
and then you make the link with the outside world, with what you're going to do, how you're going to take any learning that's come out from that
Mm.
the group into the outside world and act on it. So that for me is kind of the purpose of the reflective groups.
Yes, and one of the things that I love the most about the idea and the concept of a reflective group is that invites togetherness, and that, as you say, as there is no clinical responsibility, we hold other kind of responsibilities as well, no, within the group, and it's about that togetherness, thinking together, and how that then reflects in what our practice will be. And I see it as well as a circuit, no, as a way of nurturing oneself, in order then, and by nurturing oneself, then the practice itself gets nurtured and gets better, and ultimately we become more reflective about our own practice, about the way that we make decisions, about the things that impact our decision making process, and also that will help us and give us, I believe, some guidance and ideas on what are the things that we are more probably sensitive to, or more vulnerable towards, or the points that will be more sensitive, so we can put as well in practice some elements of self-care if it's needed, no?
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Roxanne, I think you've expressed that incredibly well. And I think that when you do all of that, what happens is hopefully you end up enjoying your practice,
Uh-huh.
finding the joy in your work again, that sometimes gets lost when you're feeling burnt out and tired, that you remind yourself and refresh yourself about what it is that actually nourishes you. So although there may be some kind of self-care strategies that you might be talking about and your vulnerabilities in the group, the actual being part of the group is in itself is kind of life enhancing.
Absolutely. But on one thing that I'm very curious about, that I will want you to clarify a little bit more, Beverly, is the idea of intra-profession reflective practice. When you're talking about intra-profession reflective practice, what do you mean?
Yeah, okay. Now, I don't know whether it's a term that I've come up with myself or whether other people use this as
Mm-hmm.
well. I don't know. I don't want to claim something that's not mine,
Uh-huh.
but I came. up with the term because a lot of my work has been supporting interpreters, spoken language interpreters who work in mental health, and other allied professionals as well who work in very sensitive situations.
Mm-hmm.
And I provided supervision or reflective practice groups for them. But particularly for interpreters, they are, when they work, they are in a very, there's a very hierarchical structure where they have very, very little power in the intervention. And that is appropriate. It goes with the role. It's not a criticism. But if they're working with the clinician is leading, and there's no
Mm-hmm.
space for the interpreter to have really any agency in that apart from around the language itself. So even if they're working with very, very distressing material, they don't get a chance to do anything really,
Uh-huh.
and they have to hold it all, and it's very, very difficult. So they do need support, there's no question about that. But somehow, with somebody coming from another profession, in this case, the psychological therapeutic profession, and providing that reflective practice support, it kind of reinforces that they are, there's somebody else who's more powerful and they're less powerful.
Uh-huh.
So
Uh-huh.
it occurred to me that it could be a really good thing for interpreters to be able to provide this kind of support for themselves intra-professionally. So that means from their own profession to their own profession, rather than from one profession coming in and offering it to another profession, which I'm calling interprofessional.
Mm-hmm.
And it also seems really important because often psychologists or psychotherapists might run a group like this, and a lot of the session is spent with interpreters having to explain what their work is about and why they can do things and why they can't do things, and teaching basically the person who's supposed to be supporting them. And
Uh-huh.
and so it just seems to me that it would be a really good idea that we have these fantastic structures and skills in the profession of psychology and psychological therapies. Why can't we share them and train other people from other professions so that they can run the groups well, ethically, and safely? Um, and so I started to put on some training for interpreters in a very piloting kind of way.
Uh-huh.
And now there are a number of interpreters who are able to run those reflective practice groups themselves, and it's been very successful.
That's fantastic.
Same- Yeah, the same can be said for obviously nurses. It's a health profession, so that's kind of that people are aware of that. But teachers, um, lawyers, journalists, there are so many people who might benefit
Yes,
from running these groups themselves and making them
absolutely.
self-sustaining.
Absolutely, because they also are. It's interesting because one of the things, just to make a point about the material that they are working with, no? And here we normally talk about the helpers, but there are other professions as well, other professionals like lawyers, journalists, people that are working in filtering the information that we actually get to see in social media, no? And they have a specific name. I lost the word in this moment, but their role is to almost see all the material that is getting into the social media platforms and filter them, and they are exposed as well to huge amount of very horrific material
Yeah,
as the journalist, as the
yes,
lawyers, and
yeah,
that can have an impact. No, one of the things that we always talk about here is how it's creating awareness about how the material, witnessing the suffering of others, the psychological and physical pain of others, can have an impact on ourselves too. No,
yeah,
and that is the
absolutely.
very fundamental basic step from where we are doing all the reflections we do in this podcast. And as you say, then the invitation is for them creating the skills, developing the skills, and having those intra-professional reflective practice groups is possible.
Mm.
Do you think there are, in from the experiences that you have seen, what will be the pros and or the cons?
Okay, so I mean, I think I've probably already mentioned the pros, and certainly for a profession like interpreters, they're really not, public service interpreters are not well valued at all. They're not well
Uh-huh.
paid,
Mm.
they're not well valued, and so there is something, and they're also they work in a very freelance way. They're very isolated. Um, so there's something about them coming together, but being facilitated from within their own profession, which gives more of a sense of collective identity to
Mhm.
them, and more of a sense of agency than if somebody else from another profession is coming and doing it. So I think that's a really big pro. And also you feel understood
Mm.
by
Mm.
your fellow professionals as well. The con is that it, it, it takes a particular kind of person to be able to be a facilitator, and certainly
Yes.
not all psychological therapists are it's not right for them really to be facilitators. It doesn't suit everybody. And so, the con is that people do it without being trained and
Mm.
without having the supervision. And
Mm.
that can then lead to quite unsafe practice. So I feel very strongly that there should be a kind of a robust but brief, but very, very practical training that facilitators can go on, that's not going to take them years and years, but where they
Mhm.
are going to really, really understand the kind of the ethical tensions and the nature of psychological safety in groups as well.
Yes, psychological safety, very, very, very important if we want to be able to reflect, actually, no? Otherwise it won't happen. And one of the questions that I always have when I'm just starting a reflective group is, what can we talk about here? No, it is really many of the people that I work, normally advisors and other therapists and working in different fields, they do wonder about what is that we can talk about in the reflective practice groups. And we have touched a little bit already up on different themes, no, that can be discussed. Do you see common themes coming across in the reflective groups in general?
I mean, I think probably the same that you will see as well. I thought, just before I go to the themes, I thought you meant a concern around confidentiality. What can I talk about here? What can I bring here in
Yeah, that's
terms of
important as well.
that's
Yeah.
really important as well, and
Yeah.
very much so for interpreters too, who have a very, have very high standard of confidentiality, as we all do, and because they don't often have an understanding of supervision, it feels like they're talking about people when they
Mm,
shouldn't. So quite a bit of
mm,
work has to be done around how confidentiality works in terms of supervision and reflective practice. But I think what you're also talking about is themes. So the themes, if I read, I've made a little list actually of
okay,
themes.
okay,
So if
okay.
I read out my list of themes, you may
Mm-hmm,
just find, well, that's just
mm-hmm.
very similar.
Yes.
So things like burnouts, recognizing that you're burning out, recognizing or not recognizing that you're experiencing compassion fatigue,
Mm,
being traumatized vicariously by the material that you're hearing.
mm,
Particularly, I mean, it's not just interpreters. I know I keep talking about interpreters, but they have a very particular position in that they really are bystanders. They hear and they relay, but they can't do anything else. And
mm-hmm,
so,
mm-hmm.
it's got that material's got nowhere to go. But all
And sorry to interrupt you, but that material, it has no place to go, and this is very important. But it naturally will make us feel in a certain way, no? That very desire of doing something, I see it as a human nature, actually, no? The desire of do something about it, but realizing that you cannot do something about it, therefore a whole lot of feelings are left there somehow, and that will, brew within you if you don't actually get to acknowledge them.
absolutely, that is so, so important what you've said, because the next one on my list links
Hmm.
so well with that, because it's about managing ethical dilemmas, boundaries, and the
Yes.
frame. Because
Uh-huh.
all to do more for interpreters, or any helping person. I
Anybody.
don't want to just
Hmm.
say, yeah, often we will justify it in some way. We're so desperate to take action that we'll
Yes.
try and justify it, but actually it's not the right thing to do. It's
Mm.
counterintuitive. We're helpers, and yet we can't do everything that we
Yes.
want to do. And that's very painful and very, very difficult. So
Yes.
managing those discussions are really useful.
Very, very useful, because that element of boundaries that can really help us as well to self-soothe as well, no, in a way. It goes in both ways, can frustrate a lot, but also can help us to understand our limitations, because those boundaries are not only given by, we are touching on confidentiality, on, the ethics of our professions, whatever the profession is, but also we're talking about the boundaries, protocols, procedures within the services that we are working in, and within the organizations we are working in. There are so many different layers of boundaries that are sort of bound together, that give us a context in which we can operate, but at the same time it's telling us what we cannot do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And those tensions and those dilemmas, you see, you can, in a one-to-one reflective practice, it's very useful. When you're in
Mm.
a group and you hear other people are having very similar tensions and dilemmas, it can be very, very supporting and very supportive. And you go out there and you think, it's not just me, we're all
Yes.
feeling this difficulty, and there's a sense of solidarity, I think, when you're
Hmm.
in a group in that way. So, what else? I mean, I think I've covered much from the rest of my list of things like, talking about occupational stress, but also, and also the stress within the system as well, and whether the system
Yes,
isn't
very much so.
supportive and the pressures of time. But I want to say something about that, in that I feel that we have to be quite careful with that, in that if there are things that people can do about that, then it's very productive to have quite a lot of discussion.
Uh-huh.
If at the end of the discussion they're going to end up feeling, I'm in the same position anyway, nothing can be done, it can feel very stagnant. And so when these kind of discussions come up, one of the discussions that comes up a lot is the very, very poor remuneration, for example, of some of the people I work with. We think about what action can be taken, and if there isn't much that can be taken yet, we say, let's just have a portion of the time just expressing it, getting it out,
Hmm.
but then we'll save some time to think about the things where we really are able to do something transformational, because otherwise I think people just get frustrated and it just becomes a series of complaints, and that's not supportive and nourishing at all.
Yes, yes. It's interestingly enough, the other day in one of the groups that I run, it was one of the members of the group helping the group to realize, let's not go into the moaning place. No, we don't want to make this a moaning group. We want to find ways forward, and that is very, very important, because, as you say, no, there will be things that are, yeah, completely out of our hands. But I think also there is the tension between what the organizations can do. One of the things that we also talk here, no, in the podcast, is about the intention that the organizations have, no, the different levels of management, how they can then start to work on their own awareness, but
Yeah,
also to support, for example, the implementation of reflective groups for their
yeah,
teams. And so there is that tension between the organizational responsibility and the individual's
yes,
responsibility to take care of themselves as well, and sort of participate and be part of,
yeah,
and make it work in the end, no, for themselves too.
yeah,
Is a share responsibility, I think, but also
yes.
the problem is not only the person's problem, because we tend to think
No.
about self-care and then it's about us, no, us
Mhm.
taking the steps towards self-care and so on, but it's not it's not always like that. It's not all, not, the solution is not always there. There is so many issues within organizations in
Yeah.
terms of a structure, levels of demand, so
Yes.
many difficulties that is completely out of the hands of the people that are probably in these
Yes.
groups to
Yes.
resolve,
Yes.
really.
Yes, it's very, very true. And I agree with you completely that there does need to be quite a radical change in culture in
Mm.
terms of the prioritization without question of this type of space. It is not a luxury. It looks like a luxury. It's not. It's fundamental. So if you can give lots and lots of time and space to bureaucratic procedures, why are they getting priority
Mm.
over this? So I don't think it's an insurmountable problem, but I do think that it's a changing culture. I don't think it needs loads and
Yes.
loads of resources. I just think people need to realize that what they're doing by saving time, by not having these spaces, is creating huge amounts of extra work because these spaces weren't in place. They just need to make that equation work in their minds.
Yes, and that ultimately is also a very savvy business decision to make these places actually available for the teams, no?
It is very
Mm.
savvy. It is very savvy. But the
Yeah.
thing is trying to convince people of that because it's counterintuitive, as
Yes.
so much of our work is. It's counterintuitive. I mean, that's why we have a profession, otherwise we'd just be nice, lovely, kind, caring people who go around being helpful. It,
Mm.
it's something else we've got to offer.
Absolutely, absolutely. And because there is so much to offer as well, no, there is so much energy and positive energy there. Um, so since we're thinking about what can be done,
Yeah,
which we like, what do you think is that? Well, we're talking about the need of change of culture, right?
yeah.
In organizations. In more concrete ways or practice, what would you say that the organizations or people within the organizations can start to do to
Yeah,
develop the
yeah,
reflective support groups?
yeah. Absolutely. And I am really clear about this as well. So I said it wasn't
Uh-huh.
about resources, but it is in a way, but they're very small resources because money always gets people's attention effectively.
Yes.
So there are two types of organization that I'm thinking of. One are NGOs, charities,
Yes. Hmm.
and there are examples, not enough, but there are some examples, and I think all charities should be doing this, is in their funding bids, including money to run these groups. Not much money is needed at all, but the
Mm-mm.
money to run the groups, if you want to backfill staff their time to attend the groups, you can do that. But actually, it's not necessary because you'll find staff are far more efficient when they're in these groups. They just are much, much more productive. So that's one thing, is that this should go into the bids. It
Mm.
shows your workers, if you're a CEO, for example, and you're writing the funding bid, you're saying to your workers effectively, I think this is so important. I'm going to spend more time on this funding bid in order to get the money in so that we can have it. And then once the money's there,
Hmm.
it concentrates people's minds. It's kind of like you have to come. If you don't come, you're wasting this
Yes.
money and so on. So that's one thing for NGOs. For organizations that are, for example, statutory services like the NHS, I think it's the same kind of thing in that they need to, well, they just need to do the sums really, and to see the impact of sickness on their rates, on their recovery rates, for example, because they're very keen on kind of like counting lots and lots of people and who've recovered and who hasn't recovered, or who's been seen or who hasn't been seen. So the sickness rates just have such an impact. And so, this is about helping people to stay well and to enjoy their work. Um,
Yes.
and so it just should be absolutely um you know, it's so obvious, isn't it? So I do think
It
those
is.
kinds of things, but I don't know how you do that kind of culture change within a statutory organization because they're so heavily freighted with bureaucracy.
Yes. And that's the thing, that always puzzle me, and probably part of what motivated me to do this podcast as well is this is so evident for me in my head. It's like how it's like 1 + 1 = 2 is simple, because the better you are in and nurtured in your own well-being as a carer, as a supporter of others, the better you will be able to do your job, the better you will feel. That is about having fulfilling lives as well, because we know that, I mean, I have experienced it myself. If I don't take care of myself, I notice very quickly how my mood changed within my
Mm,
family, and normally the loved ones are the ones that
mm,
the first ones in
exactly.
noticing these kind of changes, right? And suffer the consequences of them, or sleeping patterns, or there are so many elements in which we very quickly can notice the impact of the work if we are not in that topping up and keeping
Mm,
up with that ongoing. We were saying at the beginning, you were saying at the beginning, that this is an ongoing practice that needs to be there consistently throughout time. Is not that an organization will be is good if you do 2-3 sessions, off they go, they're good. No, this is about incorporating the reflective practices in the whole operation of the organizations, no, as part
absolutely.
of.
It totally, and what you're saying is so important, Roxana. The ongoingness of this. It is
Mm-hmm.
about a commitment to
Yes.
it. Just in the way that when people sign up to do a marathon, they
Mm-hmm.
know they're
Mm.
going to have to make a commitment to go out and do that training regularly for months or whatever. It isn't just something you just do
Yes.
and that's it. So
Yes.
when people talk about, I've been asked to do a reflective group because there's a crisis, for example, I wouldn't do it. I will not do it because I won't
Yes.
support that way of
Mm.
thinking. Those groups should
Yes.
be there already. They're there. They're holding people. They're the safety net that's there. So when the crisis hits, you're just going back into your regular group and they're holding
Yes.
you and metaphorically putting their arms around you. You don't have to start from zero. I think it's absolutely essential that they are part of the DNA of organizations.
Yes. And we were talking about many episodes ago about humanitarian workers as well, no, and what they are deployed to do certain missions, and then they come back. What do they come back to is a
Yes.
big question as well, no, and how
Yeah.
these kind of groups can be so helpful.
Yeah.
I think the intra-profession reflective practice answers in a way a question that I have been having for a while, in terms of trying to figure out. I've been asking myself, is when we are talking about people that are witnessing the suffering of others, but we are thinking about people in different fields, right? Because we are talking about interpreters, lawyers, humanitarian workers, etc. And I've been wondering, is there a difference in each of these fields? Long story short, I think there is a difference, and I think probably then the answer to responding better to and understanding better the needs of those groups is this, no, the intra-profession reflective practice, and so that people can start to train and develop the skills to run these groups within their peers, no, and that's another question. So when we are saying that the element of intra-profession, are you also considering that is for the work with peers, or it has to do with what I'm thinking of is, for example, if a group will get started, do they need to have someone that is external to that particular organization, that particular group. Like, for example, an interpreter going to another organization, not to the same organization they work for, to do the reflective group. And what is your recommendation around that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think where possible, it is good to have an external person, because otherwise you're having to manage so many different relationships
Mm.
at the same time. And if you're not that experienced in this kind of work, and they won't be, how can they be? Then it's a lot to ask of somebody. So I think with
Mm.
somebody who, once they've got a lot of experience, I think that would be okay. But if not, but the thing though about interpreters is that, for example, I know one organization where they are running reflective groups within the organization, but they
Mm-hmm.
don't work with the other interpreters. You know, they're all off doing different things. They
Uh-huh.
haven't got a prior relationship with them.
Okay.
So that seems absolutely fine. But I think it's just when there's that managing different relationships, I think it's a too big an ask for
Mm-hmm.
somebody who's only
Mm-hmm.
just graduated, if you see what I mean.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I hear you. Yes. And we mentioned earlier emotional safety. Can you tell us a little bit more about what is the role of safety in the reflective group?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, fundamental one, right?
It's fundamental. It's fundamental because without that, um, people aren't going to really share, are they? I mean, I
Mm,
know I wouldn't if I didn't feel psychologically safe.
mm,
So I think it's really important that the facilitator is able to create a structure, model a structure, be the container for participants' anxieties and fears related to mistakes that they may have made and judgments that people make. Because one of the things about the reflective practice group is for people to bring material about things they've done that they don't feel that good about. They don't think it was
yes.
really good. Because otherwise you're just sort of like you're not going anywhere, so it's an
Mm.
opportunity to learn, and so people have to feel really really safe to do that. And I think there's a tension. Arabella Kurtz has written a really interesting book called,
Sorry, can you
um
repeat her name?
yeah, Arabella Kurtz,
Uh-huh.
Kurtz, How to Run Reflective Practice Groups, a guide for healthcare professionals.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. It really is. And I agree with her that there needs to be a balance for giving space for people to express and then bringing it back to thinking. So, yeah, so I think I mean, we've already talked about that, the kind of the balance between kind
Yes.
of the emotional side and the vulnerability side, and then
Yes.
coming back to thinking. But the other way that I think about safety in the group is I call it dynamic safety,
Uh-huh.
because it's no good just everybody feeling safe, because we can get into quite a stagnant situation where everybody's just being very nice and lovely to
Mm,
each other, which
mm,
which
mm.
is nice, but we need to kind of like have a kind of support challenge continuum, so that people can feel they're being stretched and they're being taken beyond what they were able to maybe think about
Mm-hmm.
themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then that becomes much more dynamic and it's valued much
Mm-hmm.
more. Because if it's just coming and having a warm bath, people may not prioritize it. Whereas if they think this is something that's transformational for me, they're going to value it.
Yes. So is that very important balance between warmth and challenge, a
Exactly.
respectful challenge between peers
Yes.
that actually help you to,
Yes.
broaden your horizons in a way, and the
Yes.
way that you're thinking about your practice. And that's the
Yes.
beauty of the thinking together aspect, that has that influence,
Yes.
that help us to see things in slightly different perspectives as well, no, and
Yes.
find different explanations to certain situations, and the way that
Absolutely.
we explain ourselves as well, certain
Yes.
situations.
Yes. But of course, participants may not know how to do that.
Yes,
It
exactly.
just can't. And so, the role of the facilitator is modeling it all the time so that
Mm,
participants can see, but also sometimes having to step in.
yes.
If a participant is doing something that really isn't respectful, they may not mean to, they may not know they're doing it, then the role of the facilitator is to step in, because otherwise people won't feel safe.
Absolutely. Yes. It's a quite dynamic role then.
It is completely dynamic. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. I mean, if you just think it's just sitting there, it's certainly not. You're
No,
on it the whole time. You're watching all the time, and thinking about, what's going on, and maintaining your position as a
absolutely.
facilitator. You're not
Yes.
a participant. You're a facilitator.
Yes, and the important thing as well, I think, is to mention that people can learn these skills. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the courses that you have developed? Because I think it's very important and a very useful material that is available out there, so that people
Great.
can access to these courses. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh, thank you. Okay, so just very, very briefly, I'll just give the introduction, is that I developed these courses for interpreters. They are 3-day intensive. I call the model that I use, I call it a critical apprenticeship model. So
Uh-huh.
people are really immersed in. So part of the course is being in a reflective practice group that I'm facilitating, and being an observer participant, so that you are in it, but also after the group's finished, you have to deconstruct it. So basically, people are taking notes all the time about what I'm doing, what they like, what they don't like, and so on. And then they have to challenge me on it
Uh-huh.
afterwards. So I have to make the case for my decisions and what I did. So that's the first bit. And then there's a little bit of theory, and then the rest is practice. They go in and they practice, and they try to put into practice what they have seen modeled by me. And that's over
Uh-huh.
3 days, with 4 subsequent short groups with supervision sessions afterwards. So I did that. I modeled that with three, just trying to think, it was 4, 3 groups of interpreters,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been kind of honing that and developing it, and it's gone quite well. And I'm now trying to expand that out to
Uh-huh.
other professions, including our own profession, if people are interested. And so, in combination, in collaboration with a training organization called Temenos,
Mm-hmm.
in January, we're putting on a foundation certificate in reflective practice group facilitation skills.
Fantastic.
Um,
And we will be sharing all the links and the
oh,
information in the description of this episode as well.
yeah, great. That's fantastic.
So people can actually access and after January there will be more, do you think?
Hopefully, yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
Depending
good.
on my energy level.
Yes, it sounds demanding on you, but it's so important and so great that actually is happening, and that people can access these places, to these courses, to actually develop the skills, because that's what we are talking about here. No, that is something that comes to mind for me, that is about the containment for the container, and is one after the other and the other, no, and this comes then as another set of skills that can support people to continue being
Yeah.
supportive for their professionals within their professions, but also taking care of themselves in the process, no.
Absolutely. And then they have their own supervision as well. So I run
I
supervision
see.
groups for the people
Uh-huh.
who've just trained and who are starting to do the facilitation. And they have found also that it has given an enormous amount of energy and excitement into their work. It's a
Uh-huh.
new thing they're doing. And that in
Yes.
itself is kind of nurturing them as well.
Yes, absolutely. I find it fascinating as well that part of the what can make the work quite exciting is to get involved in projects that are, close to our heart somehow, no? That are that keep us motivated, and that's part of creating spaces within our professions that will allow us to continue enjoying, no, because we are seeing so many awful things that we do need to have those kind of stimulus as well.
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I'm an absolute fan of projects. They are really what sustain me. And you're absolutely right. And small as well. Keep it
Yes.
small.
Uh-huh,
Why do
uh-huh.
things have to grow big and huge? Because then that's when bureaucracy takes over, and bureaucracy will eat anything in its path.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we have several ideas that we are sharing today, and something that I really, really love, Beverly, is about keeping it simple. And I always talk about the power of one. So just do something small. Start with one reflective group, learn the skills, inform yourself. There is information out there, there is books, there are the courses that you are doing, and so it is possible. Let's focus on what are the things that we can do, and take it from there. No.
What a beautiful way to, I think we're ending.
Yes, we
Yeah,
are.
what a beautiful way to end. Let's focus on what we can do
Mm.
and do it.
Yes, exactly.
Then
Yes,
go do it. And then if everybody does these tiny little things, those tiny little things mount into something very, very big when we got thousands of people doing them. So I'm a
absolutely.
massive fan of that, Roxana. Thank you
Yeah,
for that.
we're in a mission. Okay, verily, the only thing that I have left to say is a massive thank you for you for being here. I really appreciate. I love our conversations, always have. So thank you so much for your insights, for the information that you have shared today, and for everybody that is listening. If you think that a reflective group, for example, a reflective practice group will be something that you are interested in, and that's something that you want to explore, and yeah, just get in touch. We, as you know, we will be always sharing all the information that you can access in the description of this episode, and please help us to help and share it with your managers, your colleagues, everybody that you feel may be benefiting from listening to what we were talking with Dr. Beverley Costa today. So thank you so very much. And thank you for listening, everybody.